The following videos from the files of Terry Carter. If you like these videos, prove it by liking, sharing, and subscribing and leaving a comment. If you have an interesting story that you'd like to share with the rest of us, get a hold of us. We'd love to help you share it.
Kind of, those days are over for me. I like the romance. I'm not really interested in the gold. I've got other gold treasures I could be hunting. I'm not even interested in those. I'm more happy with the life I have and the adventure that I have. And, you know, if I can be a part of anything that develops, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But I'm not out, I'm not looking for anything myself. So it's just more of an adventure. That's all I'm looking at. I went on an adventure. It was into the Twilight Zone last spring.
What was that?
Well, we'd sold property that my grandfather had a prophecy on. He owned land grant that was signed by Ulysses S. Grant.
Really?
It comprised of the Provo Business Park, all of that area down to the lake, clear up into the forest boundary and down to Springville. So from Provo to Springville, all of that land was my grandfather's. Wow. He gave it up to look for a gold treasure not too far south of there.
Oh, was he the one that was looking for that where them trappers went into the...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so really, it kind of consumed him, but yet there were other interests, you know, other gold mines, oil wells, gas wells.
Yeah.
There was enough to keep him busy for his life.
Yeah.
But they never did find that gold treasure. Well, a couple of gentlemen, Indian by the name of Earl.
Uh-huh.
Only knowledge. I don't know his last name. But he blew my mind. He took me up there. That man literally blew my mind.
Really?
Sent me into a Twilight Zone experience that I will never forget.
Wow, what happened?
Well, we had, there's that trapper treasure buried down there.
Yeah.
Nobody's found. And I've always believed it's there because I know how to dowse. My granddad taught. I was the only one that had the gift in the family, so he gave me the instrument. And I was always getting a reading from this one spot, and my granddad had also taken me to that spot and said that the trapper's buried here, and he's got gold bars over him. And I always wondered, well, then why don't you go in and get him? They didn't. He'd already disturbed Chief Blackhawk's grave.
Oh.
And I think he's paid for that many times over.
Okay.
So he didn't want to disturb another grave. He wanted to go back in farther and come around and hook up to the tunnel that had the gold bars in. And so he told me that, and I remembered the spot since I was a child. And in taking Dan, oh gosh, I can't remember his last name, Dan and Burl down there, I pulled up on that dump having not said a word about treasure. And I thought, when I got out of the car, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the old Indian just went up to that spot and said, this is where it is? But I forgot about it, and I took Dan over to the ancient mine dump. Next thing I heard was, Dan, bring your gold checker. And I look up, and he's right where my granddad took me to.
Wow.
Now, if that isn't a confirmation to me, I don't know what is. Well, Dan had a gold checker. He had a dowsing rod with one of those ball-bearing pivot. He was holding that just, you know, plumb with the gravitation of the ground. He wasn't dowsing. He was just holding it, and it was, you know, pointing down toward the ground. There was a sinkhole about 4 feet away from Verl. And as I was sitting there, and Dan came walking up, and as he walked by that gold checker literally stood out 30 degrees and defied gravity.
Really? I've seen that.
It was amazing.
I've seen
it. It was amazing.
I've seen that happen once before up on the saddle up there up on Baldy. A guy doing that with a dowsing pendulum. That it did the exact same thing, and I couldn't believe it.
See, now I talked to a guy who'd rappelled on the ledge of Baldy, and he said that there was a big gold vein right there, but he was hanging off the rock, and he saw it, And he told me about it, but he says, I've never been able to get back to it.
Really?
It's sitting right there in the open.
Really? Huh.
But anyway, that wasn't it. I mean, that gave me confidence that this old guy had something.
Right.
He wasn't a fraud.
Right.
But he took me up. I took him up higher up to the Syndicate mine, and there's red rock up there. And Burl, the Indian, said, "Bring out your gold and check this rock." So I brought out my gold and put it on the dowsing rod, and for sure, it just was crazy. And he said, "This is like telluride gold." He says, "You put this in an assay and it'll burn up, go up in smoke, and you get no result."
Nothing, huh?
But he says, "Just red in the rock, you look for red, and you will have gold."
Huh.
And I had known that. I knew that because down lower, we went through a red vein, and a friend of mine said, "You just break out a shovel load of that, and let's break it up and pan it, and I'll show you what's in it." There wasn't only pure gold flakes, microscopic, but there were little silver balls of platinum
Really?
all through it.
Huh.
It's just loaded. That property is loaded. So anyway, we're sitting there, and he goes, "You've got diamonds." And I looked at him, I said, "How the hell do you know I've got diamonds? I mean, who would look for diamonds in this area?" But I had them in my dowsing equipment. And he's put the diamonds on. So I put the diamonds on, and he says, "Point it up here." And as I pointed it up there, it started pulling to the left. And he says, "No, go left." So I moved it left, and immediately my dowser started going crazy. It was just almost breaking. It
Really?
was just hammering. And he says, "The lady's diamonds." And I said, "The lady's? Who's the lady?" And he said that she was an ancient queen, a princess.
Really?
And she hid her diamonds up here on the mountain. Well, that's a great fable. It's a wonderful story.
Right.
I go back in the mine with Dan, and Burl stays out because, you know, these Indians have a thing about going underground. And we're in there for about an hour and a half, and as we're coming out, we're maybe 200 feet from the entrance, and I hear two men talking and a woman. And I say, "Hey, Burl's got company." You know, we get out there, and there's nobody there.
Really?
And Burl had been sitting across the canyon. And it had been raining, and there were no footprints. There were no tracks of anybody being there. And I'm kind of blown away. I'm like, where are these people? And Burl comes over, and he goes, "You had company."
Wow.
I said, "I know. We heard them talking. Where'd they go?" He said, "You heard them talking?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, who they were?" I said, "No." He said, "Two of them were ancient priests."
Really?
And they were talking about 60 feet below the entrance to this tunnel is a tunnel that connects to all the portals that connect to the underground city.
Huh.
And I'm like, dropping my load right there. And he said, and then a woman came. It was the princess. And she was very concerned. She said, "They've found my diamonds. Are they going to take my diamonds?" And the priest looked at her and said, "They won't take your diamonds today."
Wow. Wow.
No footprints. You know, I'm blown away. That's enough for me.
Yeah.
I want to go down and rest. I need a nap.
Yeah.
But I couldn't do anything about it because I don't own the mineral rights anymore.
Right.
I don't own the property. But what a great, great experience. It was
Boy.
amazing.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story just to connect with that. Just for, I mean, nothing important, just interesting to me is I used to sell prospecting and metal detecting equipment and stuff like that. And I had a guy come to my place and was renting a metal detector from me. He told me, he says, "You got to talk to," he owned a motorcycle shop. He says, "You got to talk to one of my mechanics. He's got one heck of a story." And so I talked to him, and he told me that he worked for this drilling outfit, and he said that they was drilling up above is it Spring Lake? Is that before Santa Quin? Spring City, Spring Lake?
Yeah, Spring Lake.
Spring Lake. They was drilling.
Probably up in Picayune Canyon somewhere.
This guy was having them drill a hole. They was looking for a cavern up above there, somewhere around there. And he told them, he wouldn't tell them what they was drilling for, but he just told them, if I find what I'm looking for, he says, you guys will be well taken care of. And then he says, finally, after the guy had spent $10,000, they didn't find it, and he finally told them the trapper's story. And so I'm assuming that was probably your dad or your granddad.
No, it was Island Jacobs.
Ah.
I gave Island a lease on the land, and Island went up there and located 1, 2, 3, 4, at least, no, 5. He located 5 buried treasures. And this guy is amazing. He's an alchemist. This is a guy that can take brass and bronze, spare parts from plumbing, and turn them into gold.
Really?
Turn them into rhodium, turn them into platinum.
Really?
The only problem was they were actually better than the original.
Wow.
And so he couldn't sell them as that. Like the rhodium actually had a higher melting point, more, it was harder, and it was lighter, the rhodium that he made. And so it would have even been better for space travel.
Wow.
But he always had $30 to $80 million coming in a month, and never got it.
Never got it, huh?
Yeah, it's all all these dicers that were looking to use them up. But
this guy said they spent $10,000 in drilling. So.
Oh, I'm sure they did. And there's one area, unbelievable. It's right there in what's it called? Oh, Yellow Rock Canyon. If you're in Santaquin, and you look up into the canyon there, you'll see a mine dump, and that's Yellow Rock Canyon.
Okay.
And he set up the drilling equipment on that one, and this is like maybe the 4th spot they drilled. They got off of it every time. They never hit it. But this was about 350 feet under the mine dump. And my dad had picked up with his equipment, he picked up this big anomaly that's in there. And so they started a mine in there, and it was a real cavey mine, real dangerous, awful. And they finally had to abandon it. And then Island Jacobs comes along, and he sets up there. And I watched him work this, and I watched the instrument. It laid out gold bars, processed ingots, 12 feet wide, 12 feet deep, and 58 feet long.
Really?
Not one of them, 3 of them.
Wow.
3 of them.
Huh.
And then off to the east or west, there were gold coins, about a 12-foot high pile of gold coins, and a 12-foot high pile of silver coins. Now this is about 350 feet down. This is below the floor. This is below the level of the valley, but yet we're up above. He had them set up and drill there, and they drilled over 350 feet and didn't hit anything. And so he dropped a rhodium bar down that, tied onto a piece of twine, and had it go all the way down. And when he got down to that length, he found that the shaft had drifted off of the gold field and missed it by about 3 feet.
Oh, geez.
According to him, there's several big treasures buried right there on those foothills. Big treasures.
Huh.
And he died surrounded. He was literally poisoned, he and his wife, by all of the alchemy that they'd done.
Oh, really? Yeah?
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's just fascinating. And he had no real pride. He wasn't a prideful man. He was very humble. But he was surrounded by these special ingots that he'd made of different metals. was just fascinating.
Wow. Yeah, that would have been...
He wanted me to be his apprentice.
And you didn't do it, huh?
Sorcerer's apprentice. Oh, no.
Huh?
I couldn't put up with having to wait, 30 days you're going to have $30 million and hope for it, and it never comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've lived through that my whole life. Yeah, I don't know. I've had a lot of experiences. I mean, I could bend your ear for a long time. What I really kind of enjoy, personally, is the fact that I started mining when I was 4 years old. My dad was a miner. My grandpa was a miner.
Yeah, so you grew right up in it.
When I was 4 years old, to punish me, my dad took me up to the mine, and he had this plan because I had sworn, I had said a naughty word at 4 years old. And there were some old people up there. They'd lost their teeth, bad health, all kinds of problems and deformities. And his goal was to say, if you swear, this is what's going to happen to you. Kind of backfired on him.
You liked it, huh?
But it's a great story.
Yeah.
And I love these people. Astro Kings, she's like great-grandma. And so I could give a little history about how I grew up in mining.
Yeah, that would be great.
I hiked up it's got to be over a mile and a half. Anyway, at 4 years old, I left the cabin and I went all the way up that road. And my dad had told me about going in mines, and he'd taught me. And so I went in this mine in the dark, no light.
Wow.
I'm 4 years old. I've been on a
mile
and a half hike.
Wow, you're adventurous.
And it was about a mile back in the mine to get back to where my dad was.
Really?
And as I was going in, I heard the rumble of the mine car coming out, and I knew, because my dad taught me, I had to find the widest spot of the tunnel and hug the side of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget watching those guys go by with the mine car.
Wow.
It could have killed me. It could have splattered me.
Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, he figured, hey, let's use him. He can work. And so they had me cleaning the rail and working up at the mine since I was 4 years old.
Wow.
And I'd just like to give a little history of me, and then maybe a history of
that would be
my
great.
grandfather's explorations. Maybe some stock certificates, some memorabilia of mining, something like that they could look at. And then,
yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. My grandfather, when I was a little boy, he put me on his knee and he told me about going to Old Mexico, to a place that was called Tenochtitlan. And he researched records, ancient records, and he had to have an interpreter. And he said, and you know what I found? What, Grandpa? And he said, I found the secret to the most valuable treasure on the whole earth. Well, I started listening.
Right.
And he told me about finding the story of Montezuma's treasure.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And they tried to locate where the treasure was because he knew where it was. It's there. It's there in the records. And it described how there were thousands of porters that brought the wealth of the treasures up into the northern wilderness. And the reason was because they learned that Cortez was not a god, and they had a fear that he was going to come and destroy their culture and that he was going to take their wealth. And so in the time that it took Cortez to go back to Cuba and regroup, and I think it was like 8 months, 9 months, they spirited the treasure out of the halls of Montezuma. Now, they put treasure here, they put treasure there, kind of like false leads.
Okay.
But the main treasure was ported northward for, like thousands of miles.
Yep.
It was ported northward into the southern Utah area, into the desolate wilderness. This was the depths of the highest canyons. So what does that tell you? It's like right along that Green River confluence area right in there.
Huh? Did he ever go looking for it?
Oh, you bet. And they tried to get the permission from the owner of the property to go in, but at that time, it was there was just uranium mining going on everywhere. And this guy didn't want to have anything to do with uranium. They didn't want to tell him what they were drilling for was Montezuma's treasure. Now, what he'd done is they had brought the treasure north, and they removed all of the plants and preserved them. They removed all of the topsoil and preserved it.
Huh.
They removed the underlayment and preserved it. Then they started excavating into the hard rock, and they chiseled and they broke out so that the way I envision it is a keystone, and they made a huge cavern in the ground. All of these porters brought the wealth of Montezuma's treasure, and you have no idea how vast this is.
Oh, I can imagine.
The Aztecs, they conquered civilizations, and so they had their treasure.
Yeah.
So we're talking about millennia of treasure,
right?
Wealth of knowledge.
Yeah.
Now, all of this was buried along with the porters. They were all sacrificed, and there was apparently one guard. He was one of the guards that made sure that the porters wouldn't get away, that the secret wouldn't escape. And apparently this is either a descendant or the guard himself that talked to a Catholic priest and gave his history, and my grandfather found that history and translated it, and he knew where the treasure was. So they went down, they tried to get permission to drill. The owner of the property wouldn't have a thing to do with it, and the project was abandoned.
Terrible.
And from what I understand now, it's under Lake Powell.
Oh, really?
But it's a Crescent Valley, and I don't know. You know, I have romance thoughts of my own. I've heard legends of down there in Moab. They have, or where is it? I think it's Moab, but they have Montezuma days. And back in the early days of the settlement, they had found up in the ledges tunnels, and these tunnels were filled back in.
Yeah, that's
the muck.
Kanab in Johnson Canyon.
And okay, Kanab. That's where I'm thinking of. They had filled all of these things back in, and I would bet if you took a triangulation of these tunnels and got the direction of those tunnels, that they would probably all intersect out there in the valley, and you'd find a Crescent Valley, and in that Crescent Valley is where Montezuma's treasure is buried.
Interesting.
All of that Spanish treasure is cursed, you know, according to our American legends.
Right.
It's all cursed. But this is kind of different. It's special. And you know the legend of Rhoads and the church.
Yeah.
But what they did is they went out there, Dad bought the map, but then they wouldn't sell the map. It was Mrs. Rhoads, and I don't remember her name.
Sidsey?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
but she had a map, and she wanted $10,000, as I recall. The day they got out there, it was determined that she didn't want to sell it. It was on a buckskin.
Yep.
And she changed her mind, and she didn't want to separate with it. And they said, well, you know, all we need is the location. It's not, the map isn't so necessary if we can just copy it down. And so they bought it, and they copied it down. She kept the original. I don't know what's happened to it.
Mary Salzer, Guyman, some Morgan Steele or something like that, she ended up with that.
Oh, really?
She ended up with that, but I don't know what's happened to it after she passed on. I know her boy, he's way older than me. He's probably in his middle 60s now, loyal still. And I asked him about it.
Any relation to a Ray Steele?
A Ray Steele?
Any relation at all? Out of Payson?
I have. It could be because he lives in just past that little town that's past Santaquin and headed to Eureka. Goshen. Goshen. No, even past Goshen.
What's that called? Alberta.
Alberta? Before Alberta. There's another little town. Maybe it is Alberta. It's before Alberta. Between Goshen and Alberta.
That would be the, I think I know where.
How come I can't think of it? Anyway, that's where they lived. And that's where Loyal lives now. But I don't know what happened to the map. I'd have to contact Loyal and see if he knows. But his mother ended up with that map somehow. So.
Huh. Well, I ended up with the original that they copied from. It was a lined piece of paper that they had. A little notebook paper.
Yeah.
Like a school primer book or something. And I've got it somewhere. And I always, took pleasure in reading Thompson's book, and he's changed everything.
Yeah.
And I think all these guys that are publishing books and giving out maps or changing the maps so that
100% they are.
Chance of finding it.
Yeah. They're not only that, but they're making up their own maps and misleading and doing all kinds of things like that. But yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I believe that.
Yep, that's
so
true.
Anyway, I've got that somewhere, but it just blew me away to open up this case and find all these claims that are registered. They're no good now, other than historic value.
Just the historic,
but it does describe the area.
Yep.
And then there's two maps that are from that period of the I guess you can call it a geological survey or whatever. And right on one of the lines is an X, and it says pine. And I know damn well that that's the pine tree.
Yeah.
And that's where Dad, he told me that what happened to him. And the story I heard was that they bought the map and Dad went up and explored that area. His dad had been in an accident just shortly after I was born. I remember it. And so he couldn't hike with him and couldn't go up there, but he left Vern to go on and do the claiming and search the area, and he stayed down with the Jeep. And my dad got lost, apparently. He filed the claims, but he got lost, and he was 3 days up in there.
Wow.
And he finally found his way back. And it was just about the time that Grandpa was ready to go and get help. And they went down into Duchesne, and they made an announcement to the Duchesne Gazette that they'd found the mine. Because Dad had found the gold. There was evidence of work being done in one of the shafts. There were 3 sinkholes. There were 3 X's on the map. So he was confident that he was at that spot.
Right.
But he said that it was the opening was only big enough for a child to crawl down into. That doesn't surprise me.
No. Yep, that's how they would have made them. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, they got a team of men together, and they went back up in there, and everything was topsy-turvy. It's as though a D8 Caterpillar had gone up in there and changed everything.
Oh, really?
And just ruined it. Ruined it. Wiped it out. Now, if you read the original edition of, I think it's Thompson's book, he slanders my dad and my grandfather. And
it's been a long time since I've read that book, so I don't really remember what it says about it.
Yeah, he makes claim that they went up there and destroyed that.
The tree? I do remember that. It seems like they said they bulldozed it over or something like that. Yeah. That wasn't true, huh?
No, it wasn't true.
Okay.
And he made Thompson do a retraction on it, at least change it. And I think it had been changed in the subsequent versions of the book. But my dad told me that his father put his arm around his shoulder and just looked at him and says, "Come on, son, this is bigger than the two of us, and they walked off the mountain.
Ah. So they just kind of left it after that. That was it. Didn't they have some...
Yeah.
They filed all the claims, but they never really did any digging or anything then?
Well, I can't tell you. I don't know.
You don't know, huh?
I know that my granddad, since he was 12 years old, he was president of mining corporations.
Ah.
I mean, he had a great drive to bring this gold out of the mountains. And I don't know a lot of the history. It really surprises me to find that he filed so many claims, and I just can't believe that they'd let it go.
Huh.
I would seem to think that they'd want to, go in there and work it. But after finding that, it's like my dad told me, he says it's as though there was a big helicopter that dropped in a bulldozer and destroyed everything.
Really?